Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the 001 Radio Gamescast, episode number 53. As always, I am your host, Ryan, and I'm joined by my lovely duo of co-hosts, Alex.
Hello.
And Brett.
Hello.
Oh.
Oh, no. It's Wyatt.
What's he doing here?
Who invited him?
Who invited him back?
Brett turned around and just transformed into Wyatt behind our backs.
It happens to the best of them, you know what I'm saying?
Yep.
Is oh god, is the cardboard cutout in the room?
Oh yeah, Claude's watching over him.
Claude did make his way over here just to say hi. We don't have cams on today, but he does say hi to everyone. He's waving.
You'll have to take our word for it.
Cams will be back very soon, so no worries about that if you're watching the video portion. This week we're gonna have a lighter episode. We've been talking about a lot of heavy design themes and whatnot, and lots of April Fool's shenanigans the past few weeks. So we're gonna take it back. We're gonna go back a step and calm back down and talk about just things that we've been doing recently, loosely veiled under the guise of talking about the evolution of mechanics, but not really, because Brett also wants to talk about that and he's not here. So
I don't believe you. I think you're just bamboozling us again.
Yeah,
you're gonna drop a topic on us out of nowhere. Yep.
This is just an extended out of season April Fool's joke.
Wyatt no longer has any trust in his body.
Here's the thing. Honestly, the biggest April Fool's joke to the audience was that we're using face cams consistently. That was the April Fool's joke.
I mean, okay.
We got you.
All right. That means we can get the show started. And you see, we do little awards during the show. We have constant inane games that have no purpose, but aside from making us maybe giggle occasionally. So this time, our game, Brett's not here, Brett's least favorite thing. All right, Alex, I need you to tell me Brett's least favorite thing.
Oh, wait, out of anything or just no? It's
Brett's
not multiple
least
choice.
Favorite thing. Just
oh no!
What's his least favorite thing? We'll pick the winner when Brett's back and tell him what we thought his least favorite things were.
Oh no! His hat after the incident.
Okay.
What?
That's something you'll have to ask him about.
I'm gonna say Brett's least favorite thing is the fact that he doesn't have Claude anymore because Wyatt took him. Wyatt, what's Brett's
I didn't steal him. I just took him without asking permission.
Borrowed without asking. You know,
exactly.
Bring him back.
Yeah. You know, he can crash here for like a week or 2 weeks or a year. Brett's least favorite thing is me.
Wow. It's gonna be hard to beat that.
No, it's not. We know his location. We can beat him easily.
Oh no! All right.
I don't like where
I'm
this
on my way over
conversation's
right
going.
now.
I don't like where this conversation
becomes the
Why is it
domestic
every
abuse
single
podcast?
episode of this show? Why is it every single episode of this show? Alex threatens my life.
I do, don't I?
I thought you were going to deny it
on that
for a
at some
second.
point.
I was like, nah, you can't really deny it.
No.
All right.
I won't.
I mean, there's a reason I keep my door locked constantly.
Yeah,
Let
of course.
me in.
At first, I thought it was just because of Claude, but I guess Alex makes more sense.
No, look, the door's always open to Claude. That's why he's here right now. He always has a place.
Well, I thought it was that he would try to get out if you didn't lock it, but
oh no, Claude wants to be here. I may have to strap him to a table, but he does want to be here.
So the Harley Quinn approach to therapy.
Stockholm syndrome. Gotta love
Eventually, he will learn to love it here.
Oh,
of course he will. Okay, so for the last few weeks, we haven't really talked about games news and the lighter stuff, so we're going to bring some of that back and cover a few things that have happened over the past month-ish, a little bit less than a month, that are pretty interesting. Sound good, boys? Lads?
absolutely.
Yeah, great.
Yes, sir.
Alright.
Fine.
So there's a game that I think we all probably have heard of, but aren't terribly interested in, called 6 Days in Fallujah. I don't know if you two have heard of this game.
Yes.
Wait, I think I have.
So this is the game that originally seemed pretty interesting because it was like this tactical shooter in the style of like SWAT, the old SWAT games. But as more information has come out about it being like told by war veterans. It's seemingly very one-sided, telling a story about war criminals, basically. not 100% correct, but it's dehumanizing people that are Middle Eastern in the way that it's portrayed. So there's been some issues recently, and they published a trailer that went real hard on the murdering of Arabic people, and it didn't go over so hot for I think understandable reasons.
This was back in 2007, wasn't it? I'm probably getting my dates wrong. I feel
No,
like
this was like 2 weeks ago.
Wait, what? I could have sworn there was a game called like 6 Days in Fallujah, years ago. What?
I mean, it's possible there was a game similar, but 6 Days in Fallujah is it's developed by Highwire, who has done some questionable things before. They've not really made any real video games aside from a PlayStation VR exclusive. So no one's quite a relatively untested studio. And this game's just kind of being published, and it's been billed a lot as like a super realistic military sim shooter. The issues come in when you start to examine like what you're fighting and why. It's basically murdering a bunch of Arabic civilians. So it's a little bit sketchy.
How heroic!
A little bit.
Now, the theory right now is that this is probably a marketing scheme to drum up controversy, so that people will probably pick the game up because of controversy. And
so it may not be as bad as it's
so
portraying
the assumption is that the
itself.
game is probably not going to be nearly this bad as the marketing is making it seem, but the marketing's doing like the classic shock marketing tactic of.
I mean,
I
it's
still
still
think
pretty
doing-
scummy marketing to make it.
Oh,
So
absolutely,
what
but
you
we don't
do,
really know if this
yeah.
is like solidly landing on the developers' end or if this is mostly the marketing team.
Well, that was what I was going to ask Ness, is if this is like a tactic by the developers, or this is
Yeah.
kind of like out of their hands. We don't.
I
know.
highly doubt it's attacked by the developers. This is still the kind of thing that you probably shouldn't make a game about. Generally, usually,
No.
if you want to tackle real world issues like this, you usually want to do it through a lens of something not real, like set it in a planet where social relations are different and not quite the same.
You need some kind of buffer. There.
Yeah, you need to not make it about things that have actually happened, because oftentimes, if you haven't quite done the right amount of research, you might get things very wrong.
Or maybe a slice of life visual novel.
Yeah, or you could do that. I'm sure
That's
that would also
something.
work.
That's something.
But yeah, it's like when Red Dead is trying to tell a like darker story, it can get away with it because it's in a veiled fantasy-ish, not quite fantasy, but like a fake
Hollywood
history
Western.
version.
High
Hollywood
West.
Western.
It's not using real people for the most part, aside from nods to classic Western cinema and whatnot. So you have to have a lot of self-awareness of what you're doing in order to pull these things off, and it really seems like they are not having the tact that Rockstar tends to have
And
when
if they
games
do,
like this.
they have not shown that at all yet.
Yeah, who knows? When the game comes out, maybe it'll be great. Maybe. Probably not, but maybe.
We'll see.
Speaking
hard
of
to
bad
tell.
first impressions, followed by hopeful greatness, is this the wrong time for the segue?
I mean, we're in the news section, Alex. We gotta Outriders will
oops.
come up later. We're just talking about random things. To be fair, the 6 Days in Fallujah thing is kind of the biggest thing to have happened in the past month-ish of games news. It's the big one of issues that has popped up. There's some minor stuff like Bethesda has officially been welcomed to Xbox. I don't think we actually talked about it when that actually happened. So you can now on Game Pass play almost every Bethesda game.
And they use what is it? They've turned Bethesda into a unit of measurement as well. It was like Microsoft was selling 3 Bethesdas of VR equipment to the U.S. military.
Oh yeah, a unit of fiscal measurement.
Wait, what?
Yeah.
Is this a real thing?
Yes.
I've not heard of that, but I'm gonna take Alex's
assume-
word.
Are you
measurement?
are you yanking my chain right now?
I'm
What's going on
not.
here?
I assume the unit is in line to how much they bought Bethesda for.
I would assume so. I have not heard that phrase being used, so I cannot tell you directly if that is the case. But Speaking of Bethesda, but not at all.
What a segue.
So Square Enix, actually, this does kind of relate to Bethesda because Bethesda did some scummy choices for Fallout 76, so we can kind of associate this.
Oh no.
Square Enix has published 2 looter shooters recently. Or not looter shooters, but 2 looter games recently. Marvel Avengers, which, as we all know, kind of crashed and burned, and Outriders, which has
seemed like it was going to crash and burn.
Seemed like it was going to crash and burn from our demo impressions, at least on PC, but has now passed Borderlands' all-time high player count on Steam.
God.
So
really,
yep, not by much. I think it was like sub 1,000 people, but
I mean,
passed Borderlands
even getting
2's
near those
all-time
numbers.
high.
Even getting near those numbers, though.
Oh, absolutely, huge numbers for Outriders. Avengers has made another in a series of bad decisions, and like this is a shame because I think Avengers at its core it has a fun combat system and some interesting choices, but it's just like in a shell of a game that's so poorly put together, it's just kind of like falling apart. So they had said that the Marvel Cinematic Universe costumes for the game would be a like free reward for an in-game event a while ago. Mm-hmm. Those costumes have now are now going to be released in the in-game store for about $14 each.
Oh
wow!
So our game is crashing and burning. People want more content. People want improvements. Let's lie to them. I think that's the best thing we could do.
I can't say I didn't see that coming.
It's just so confusing. That's the thing, because Square Enix can make good financial decisions that are player-centric, with, like, Outriders doesn't have any microtransactions, and it's the same publisher. Like, that's the confusing thing.
I wonder if any of it has to do with, like, maybe because, you know, it's a Marvel property, it's a Disney property, maybe that
would be my assumption.
Look, I'm not making that claim as fact. I am simply putting forth the possibility that they may be.
Yeah, it's a distinct possibility that maybe it's hard to tell if it was specifically that Square Enix was trying to make it seem better for Disney, or if this is something Disney required. I think Disney in general would rather avoid the bad public image that comes from having a ton of microtransactions. So what I'm betting happened.
What other Disney property had really bad microtransactions and changed the gaming industry because of it? I can't think of anything off the top of my head.
I mean, Disney property. I'm actually missing. What are you talking about? I'm drawing a blank here.
Star Wars Battlefront 2.
Oh, but that was EA, right? That's a different publisher.
Right, but I'm talking about just Disney properties in general. Like,
Disney properties in general. Like Kingdom Hearts has very few in-game purchases at all. I think there's been a couple in the past, but nothing major. And absolutely nothing that's like this scummy. And like say what you will about Kingdom Hearts, but they're complete games when they come out. They're you can get a lot of hours out of them.
They're completely garbage. No, I'm just kidding. I'm sorry.
And like Disney has a history of making some pretty good games, like the old Aladdin SNES game.
The Toy Story 2 PS1 game.
All the old Star Wars games too. Like Disney has a history of far more often releasing games that aren't in this kind of state. So I'm curious if what happened is there was like an agreement to get the license that specified a number, like an amount of sales that needed to happen or an amount of money that was expected, and they just weren't hitting that and decided the best way to do it would be microtransactions. Panic. Because like high pressure situation, game development, as we all know, is extremely high pressure all the time.
Wait, it is? What do you...
I would have no idea.
I was wondering where all these gray hairs on my head came from.
I was wondering where all my hair went.
Releasing games is hard. We're all in that experience of like doing this kind of stuff is not easy. So we understand when devs make decisions that maybe aren't the best, because it's not easy to make the best decisions. It's just when it's specifically...
I'm not exhausted.
When it's specifically related to like financial stuff, it's just confusing. Because these are decisions that they could fix. Like Avengers could walk back the store stuff and maybe get more sales. But now it's been relegated to PlayStation Now, so
yeah.
It's basically permanent 50% off sale. It's on PlayStation Now. Avengers has, I think, kind of run its course at this point. They're probably still going to continue releasing what they had planned to release of like
they
Black Panther and
released 2
everything.
DLC. There's no way it's over. And
Well,
it
they
was
released
really
two free
DLC.
That's the weird thing. Like the characters are free, and I'm like, if you want to charge for money for something that is actually worthwhile to players,
well, that's probably
if
their
the game had
justification
come
for
out,
microtransactions.
yeah,
Is
like
free characters.
I don't know.
But
I
there's
feel
microtransactions.
like this is the kind of thing where people would prefer you go back to the old school style of like, don't put a lot of microtransactions in. If you want to have DLC that's paid, make it substantial. Stuff like a new character. It's just the kind of thing that like we don't see a lot in modern games of DLC that's actually worth your money.
Well, it's an interesting like snafu to be in, because on the one hand it's like microtransactions are obnoxious and it affects like progression and affects all sorts of systems and stuff like that. But on the other hand, like when you look at the way that map packs in Call of Duty used to be sold, it completely split the player base in half. And for a multiplayer game, that's the last thing you want to do. And so if they have microtransactions but are able to release like free DLC that keeps the whole community together in terms of map packs, that's something to consider as well.
Well, absolutely, but that's a different scenario of like map packs are different than a character, right? Because a character doesn't lock you out of participating in like narrative content. It might have its own character arc, but it's not going to prevent you from like playing an online mission with that character.
Well, I mean then you might be in a situation where like unlocking this character then continues the main story.
Well, then that's a problem. Like that's where the issues come in.
Well, that's what I'm saying is that like there's
you gotta you gotta tailor your monetization model to fit the type of game you are. But
yes,
this feels like they just kind of failed at that. So
yes, agreed.
It's kind of a shame.
Agreed.
All right, that's about as much Avengers talk as I can stomach before.
Please.
All right, we've got some other stuff that has happened. We've gotten some heavy rumors about the next Call of Duty. I don't know if you two have heard this, but it's pretty fun.
I've heard some conflicting information.
So the biggest leak right now is that it's going to reportedly be set in an alternate version of the 1950s, where World War II is still going on. I think that could be pretty fun.
I mean,
I think they've run dry of ideas.
This isn't exactly fair of me, but when I hear that, I immediately think Wolfenstein, which
I
was just talking about last episode. But I'm fine with that because it's a cool setting.
And it's gamey. Like it's Call of Duty recognizing it's a video game.
Yeah, I'm all for Call of Duty getting wacky and weird. Here's the thing. I'm all for both because I loved Modern Warfare and how like grounded and more realistic it is. But I also really enjoyed Black Ops Cold War and just how wacky it got. Like that game gets bizarre. Like it gets kind of out there and it's it's equally as interesting in its own way. It's weird that it's all in the same series, but it's interesting, Yeah,
definitely.
So I'm totally down for it, honestly.
But of course, we don't know if these rumors are true or not. So could totally be wrong. That's 100% possible if this is just not true. Either way, it's fun to think about.
It did seem like they were kind of gearing up for another Modern Warfare because the Warzone, there's like this sort of meta story going on with Warzone that kind of could potentially set up events for a Modern Warfare 2. So I think a lot of people were thinking, that's at least what I was thinking was going to happen next. But
hasn't there already been a Modern Warfare 2?
There's been a so there's been Modern Warfare 1, 2, and 3, and then there was the Modern Warfare reboot in 2019. And then, no, it's not confusing at all what you're talking about. Here's the interesting thing to me, though, and this is a little bit of like Call of Duty sort of developer lore for you. So originally, Black Ops Cold War was being developed by Sledgehammer, but then Sledgehammer were taken off of the project and they worked on a certain section of the multiplayer, and the ones who officially helmed it were Treyarch, right? Now, from what I understand from the leaks that we've heard, this one's being developed by Sledgehammer once again, which is interesting to me because it's like, I guess they were handed the reins back again or something.
I mean, it might just be that the dev teams are having some internal issues and need to sort stuff out. Because the thing that people often are forgetting now, because COVID is like starting to wind down a little bit, is that the feelings from media that you're going to get is not necessarily immediate. It's going to be more of an over the course of the next year. We're going to see a lot more delays, a lot more games that probably have some release issues, a lot of stuff just that will be a little bit less polished than you might expect. Because like game companies still want to continue getting those games out because right now games are doing like historically well, but people are less motivated. Their quarantine, social issues are happening. It's just there's a lot of problems right now that are gonna kind of appear in weird ways. So it's just something to be aware of like game company logic may not apply fully right now because of the situation in the world.
I am a little bit, and this is personal preference, but I always felt like Sledgehammer made the weakest Call of Duty titles. They were the ones that did trying to think, they did Infinite Warfare, they did World War II, just like a lot of the weaker ones. So I'm I don't know. We'll have to see what happens, of course. But.
Yeah.
I've never liked any of them.
Which is totally
and I will
fair.
continue to.
Yeah.
Which
like
is
what
totally
you
fair.
like.
Yeah.
So
exactly.
Speaking of games about real world issues involving guns, Disco Elysium: The Final Cut has launched. It's about
What was the last part of that?
Ryan, April Fool's was last week.
Disco Elysium's Final Cut has launched with full voice acting. There's not really a lot of news here, but I just want to tell people to go play Disco Elysium. So,
can we reserve this to the shout-outs, please? Thank you.
hey, it's a game launch. We can talk about it whenever we want.
Got me there.
Binding of Isaacs has also received its final DLC.
Final?
After like 10 years, we've gotten another DLC for Isaac. Just the biggest one yet.
Wow.
That's a
I
game
didn't
that
know
keeps on
what
giving.
does it include?
DLC.
It is basically has a bunch of alternate pathways through the stuff that already exists and adds a couple hundred new items and reworks basically every other item in the game. So it's a pretty substantial expansion. A lot of people are into that game, so definitely check it out if you have it. We got some weird personnel shifting in a few different companies. So Anthem's gameplay director has left BioWare.
I mean,
what else was there for?
Fair. Fair enough.
Yeah. So
it's not like he was going to be doing a lot more anyway.
It's an interesting situation. Jonathan Warner is an experienced BioWare employee who's been there for I think the past 10 years or so. So it is kind of, it's always difficult to see people leaving games like this. Just because like it often means they were pretty talented, especially because he was one of the producers on like Mass Effect. And Mass Effect 3, the Citadel DLC, which everyone loved.
Oh.
So
wait, how was he part of Anthem then?
Well, because Anthem involved most of BioWare, I think. Yeah,
somehow.
So he does have a couple questions of he was working on both Mass Effect Andromeda as a game director and Anthem as a game director, so I see where he might be coming from of needing a change. Like it's entirely possible that like he is a talented game director but signed on to BioWare to do like narrative type games and ended up directing a bunch of these weird departures from what they normally do. And it may just be that he was like wasn't into that. So
makes sense.
This comes along with Anthem Next getting canceled. So BioWare is still having some issues with production after both Casey Hudson and Mark Terra also left. So concerning state for BioWare, I think, is the all-around impression.
But Casey Hudson's like a boomerang. He always comes back.
I kind of doubt it this time. I think
no. I had a joke and I had to say it, but yeah, he's probably gone for good.
So another franchise that I personally love very much is Monster Hunter. and Monster Hunter Rise came out, and it sold 5 million copies now, which
Oh my god!
for Monster Hunter is a lot of copies. For reference, that's fairly similar to what World sold in the launch period. World still sold a little bit more, but World was also on 3 platforms, or 2 platforms. It was on Xbox and PS4, not just Switch. So comparatively, I think that's a really good numbers for the game. And World had been the only Monster Hunter game that ever broke that high of a number before. So Capcom, I think, has turned Monster Hunter into one of their highest grossing franchises. And Rise is really good. So that's a refreshing thing to see, is that Monster Hunter is getting some more mainstream recognition. Means we'll probably get more, which is always nice. Wow, you two are just bored out of your mind during that, weren't you?
No, I don't have. Oh, I completely dropped Generations Ultimate. I need to continue that. Oh wow.
It's just not. I mean, look, I gave it a solid try. You know, it's just not. It's just not for me. You know, I'm happy for all y'all. You know, Monster Hunter fans out there. It's just not for me. So
Wyatt doesn't.
I have
like
been
boss
meaning
fights.
to play more. I want armor made out of my enemies.
I want armor made out of the skull of my enemy. It's great. All right, we did it. We got through most of the news, aside from, of course, the Neopets black market trading. But
you can't skip over things like that.
I think that's more fun to just bring up offhand.
It is. But what's going on? Oh no!
It's great.
Are there black market representatives in Neopets doing deals? Are there Neopets being traded on the black market? This leaves open so many questions, and it's time to change topics.
Yeah, well, none of those questions will get answers today, so I hope you're happy with everything you've gotten.
I never have been.
Of course not. You could never be happy. All right. We got through most of the big news. There's of course a bunch of minor things that have happened across bit. Oh, there is one more that was actually pretty interesting that I think you guys will find pretty cool. I'm glad I remembered this because I almost forgot. It's 505 Games bought the Ghost Runner IP for 5 million euros.
Oh my god. What?
5 million for Ghost Runner.
God.
So for those who don't know, Ghost Runner is a indie game that is a one-hit kill parkour game where you're trying to like
successful.
Yeah, very successful. Especially because it came out like right before Cyberpunk. Cyberpunk was on the mind of everyone. Came out,
and then it was quickly off the mind of everyone.
Yeah, quickly off the mind of everyone after Cyberpunk came out. So they released it at the perfect time.
What are they gonna do with it?
So the assumption here is they're probably going to try and turn it into more of a proper
game
franchise.
Not necessarily game because Ghost Runner is like a really well-made parkour game. It is just very solidly a parkour game, like one-hit kill level speed rushing game, which is great for people that love those. But it is also very hard because of that one-hit kill mechanic.
It's for a niche audience.
Yeah, so I'm thinking they might make something more along the lines of like the zeitgeist of what people want from Cyberpunk games. So my expectation is probably we're going to see some like an action game or something a little bit more widely appealing. Mm-hmm. Especially for like $5 million. You don't buy something for 5 million euros. You don't buy something for 5 million euros.
Well, that's why immediately I was like, they want to franchise it because they want to be able to turn it into other things.
I mean, Ghost Runner is recognizable now and it looks great. So
yeah.
So I am still equally. Oh, sorry.
Oh no, go for it, Alex.
I am still equally shocked and interested by this, but what I thought you said first was Ghost Rider. I was just like,
that would also
how
be
did
great.
they get that from Marvel? I mean, I know they haven't done anything with it in a while, but
you can make such a good Ghost Rider game. Like I could come up with a good Ghost Rider game blindfolded with my hands tied behind my back. Like, come on.
Yeah. It's just a reskinning of Days Gone.
Look, I would so be down for that. Are you kidding me?
That'd be great.
Oh my word, that would be awesome. I didn't even think
What
of
were you
that.
gonna say about the Ghost Runner
I was gonna say
acquisition?
something. Have you? Because I played the demo. Have you played a lot of it, Ryan? Like, do you own it?
I completed the demo. I haven't bought it, so I don't.
Because I'm wondering if it's the kind of thing where like there's enough like interesting world building and lore there to kind of build a franchise
So
on
there
it.
is. You do learn a lot in the demo about like a bunch of weird stuff happening, and that you're kind of like a cyborg who's been released from something by accident. So there's some cool stuff there. They set up a lot of generic Blade Runner-esque plot hooks almost for whatever they're going to do next. I don't obviously know how those things turn out in the main game. So maybe there's some answers in the main game, probably. But
because the biggest issue that a lot of franchises run into is that they pick a property that is really difficult to build off of.
Yep.
And like turn into something big, you know? Like and hopefully this is the kind of property where, you know, they can really run with it. But there's often, you know, you make a big purchase of a property that you want to expand on, but it's so simple in a way where it becomes difficult to expand on it. So
yeah,
hopefully
from
that's not
my
the case here.
limited time with the demo, I think that is the case for Ghost Runner. I also think it's the case where like people want a good Cyberpunk game, especially like a good melee Cyberpunk game, because even if Cyberpunk 2077 was great in other aspects, the melee is just kind of lackluster. So Ghost Runner,
even if it was like overall praised, I think it would have, you know, whetted people's palate for more regardless.
Exactly. Like even no matter what, Cyberpunk is opening the floodgates of more Cyberpunk games. I would be curious to see if more would happen if it was better. I want to know how that would turn out.
That would be interesting.
But obviously, Cyberpunk is still getting patched. So we'll see how the Cyberpunk genre exists in like a year's time. We'll probably know a bit more.
Do we even talk about the Cyberpunk patch?
We talked very briefly.
I think so.
We mentioned
talk about it last week?
Yeah, we mentioned it briefly. Gist of it is tons of bug fixes.
I've heard it's also introduced new bugs.
Yeah, it has not fixed the game, but it is more playable than it was.
I think it is a solid, okay step in the right direction.
but join us season 3 for our Cyberpunk 2077 check-in.
Review.
Whenever it actually is complete. So
well, after we actually do a Gamescast on it.
But yeah, exactly, when it's complete.
So there you go. There you go.
Yep. There is another interesting Square Enix game that came out called Balan Wonderworld.
Oh.
Now, I don't know if either of you two were following Balan Wonderworld at all.
I've heard it was not very good.
I haven't heard a thing about this.
So Balan Wonderworld was, let me find the man's name, but a Square Enix higher up had always wanted to make a platformer.
I heard it was someone who's like responsible for Sonic.
Or like yes, so it is behind some of the people that have done some Sonic games. Yuji Naka, that's his name. So
the name definitely sounds familiar.
Yeah, Yuji Naka is a former head of the Sonic team. He worked on a lot of games, including Nights into Dreams, which is the thing people often say Balan Wonderworld kind of looked like. He's a Phantasy Star Online producer, so worked on a lot of stuff. He really wanted to make a platformer, a 3D platformer. And so the story goes that Yuji Naka here walked up to a Sony exec and was like, please let me make the platformer of my dreams. And what happened is that whatever exec gave the okay for this was like, you get one chance to make your dream game. And then we're putting you back on whatever you are. And that game is Balan Wonderworld.
Oh, no.
And Balan Wonderworld is... So this game kind of popped up out of nowhere at the Summer Games Fest last year, I believe. It was just kind of shown in the middle of nothing. And it looked pretty interesting. It has a cool aesthetic, very unique, but at the same time, the gameplay just never really showed up. Like there wasn't a lot of it, and it all looked very janky and floaty. The big gimmick is that there's like 80 different costumes that all have different abilities, except a lot of those are completely worthless and not fun. Watching some gameplay of this game is horrid. it's so slow. It's like someone took the Mario Odyssey approach and then just decided you can only ever do one move at a time. It's like you can throw the hat
no.
or you can jump. You can't do both. So it looks horrendous to play. The game has received multiple 4 out of 10s at this point from major reviewers,
Oh no.
which is a massive shame. Yeah, this game has crashed and burned very hard.
God, knowing the
Unfortunate for
story
Mr.
that
makes me
Yuchinaka.
really sad.
That sucks.
Oh no.
This
That
is
hurts.
this is a sad day for Yuji Naka, but maybe Balan Wonder will pull a Anthem next and
Oh,
And
is that the live service game you wanted to mention there?
don't hope for that.
it's possible, but he's really not. He's not doing much.
Hey,
Right
maybe
now.
it'll pull an Avenger.
It'll pull on Avengers. Yeah, so it's unfortunate. Balan Wonderworld's real bad. Don't play that game. It's not good. Go play Mario instead. All right.
Bowser's Fury.
Hey, Bowser's Fury is great.
That's what I've heard.
We did it. So now we're going to talk. We were going to talk about evolving mechanics in games. We're still going to vaguely talk about that, but thinly disguised under the veil of we're just going to be talking about whatever we want. And basically, that's what we've been playing recently.
Mm-hmm.
So I've been talking a lot. Which one of you wants to kick us off with some
I
discussion?
want to talk about Deep Rock.
Oh my god, that was
Alrighty.
so fast.
I mentioned this game as one of my favorite games of 2020 during our award show. And I'm still playing it to this day. I absolutely adore this game. I love its art style, of its music. I love its co-op nature, but it's a very casual co-op nature where you can play this game without really working together with anyone. The missions will take longer and it's much harder, but you can do it. But if you work together, it's a thing of beauty just seeing all of the different dwarves and miners work together in the way that they do. And it's beautiful. It really, really is. Anyway.
Yeah, good.
No.
Nice.
Yeah, no. I've always preferred co-op games over competitive games, just because I think I think it's more satisfying to pull off an awesome maneuver with friends than it is to like show off how good you are to others, right? I've always found that more enticing. And I also think it I think it tends to foster much better communities surrounding the game. And I feel like that tracks, especially because like Deep Rock has one of the better communities that I've experienced before. It just feels like everyone that plays this game is super friendly to newcomers, and they want to explain things to you, not in a condescending way, but they're just really nice about it. Like, yeah, here's like the best way to use, here's the best way to use your flares as a scout or something like that. Like, here are the best places to put them. And so it's always nice to be part of a game that has a really nice community to it.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, as someone who hasn't played a ton of Deep Rock, but still enjoys it, so like Wyatt and I have been playing a few rounds when we have the time. It's a lot of fun. I'm a person that doesn't tend to like online games as much. Like I play a lot of them, but I don't tend to play them in long amounts of time. Like I'll play a couple of matches every now and then and not go crazy. So for Deep Rock, that means I get a little bit done. Like every couple of days, I'll go play a round or two, and it's very accommodating to that play style, which is nice. Especially because like my biggest issue with Deep Rock is that the missions for my schedule are just about like 5 to 10 minutes too long sometimes, where it's hard to predict if a mission's gonna take like 15 minutes or 45 minutes.
And I think you can really cut that down if you have like a full team of like friends. You can cut that time down super easily.
Exactly, but like if I'm under a time crunch, those are the times where I don't have a full team, right? Like if I'm playing with a group, I don't mind if it's taking 45 minutes because like I'm having fun playing with people. But like if I've got like a 30-minute break in between two things I got to do, and I want to play around a Deep Rock, it's hard to do that because I don't know if I'm going to finish. by the time I'm out, which is my only real problem with the game. And that's not even a problem. That's just like for
It's a
my
personal
schedule.
preference.
Yeah, for my
Yeah.
schedule, it doesn't work a ton. And like I know I've had points in my life where it could have worked because I used to play League of Legends all the time, and that game minimum
sorry.
took like 30 minutes.
You used to play League of Legends?
I was really good at League. I was like a
Oh.
very good support player. I put on a not competitive team, but a like competitive for the not pro scene kind of team. But yeah, I played a lot of League, and had a lot of fun with it. But it's the kind of game that I don't have a lot of patience for nowadays. Of just like, I tend to prefer a lot faster multiplayer matches because that means I can, if I'm not having a good game, I can just go play the next one. In something like Deep Rock, that's not really a concern because like it's co-op. There's no competition there, so it's hard to have a bad game. And if you do, it's usually funny.
Yeah, the only two times you'll have a bad game is if you have like really asshole players, which, like I said, is super super rare just because it's such a nice community. And if sometimes the
not had
game
that happen yet.
bugs, and if sometimes the game bugs, and
That
they
is
just send
the risk
constant
with
swarms after
procedural
you.
generation. We did have White and I played one mission. You got to collect these like blue glowing things, but they're not marked on your map. You're supposed to you're supposed to find them by sight. So we spawned in a map that was like super condensed and like very tunnely, and like lots of small hallway-esque sections, which means it's really really hard to find those things. And it also had like this weird height difference where we had to like mine an entire wall to climb up with one of them, which is not super fun. But that's only happened one time. Like the other time we got that mission, it was way easier.
And that's the thing too, is I feel like whatever algorithm they're using to generate these caves is really solid. Like that happens so rarely, and for a game whose environment is like completely randomly generated. And when we say randomly generated, we don't mean in the sense of like Warframe where they have preset like tile sets that they then like randomly
it's completely
together.
procedural.
And for it being 100% not just procedurally generated, but also 100% destructible, it's really impressive.
I mean, the classic example is like, think of Minecraft. Minecraft is the closest example of like terrain generation that they do.
But I would also say that this relies far more on like level design, if that makes sense, than Minecraft.
Well, yeah, because this has a lot more mechanics going on of like you need to keep track of spacing between you and enemies. Stuff
I would say
Minecraft
that
doesn't need to worry
traversal, like right off the bat, is easier in Minecraft, which makes the procedural generation less of an issue, if that makes sense.
Well, because you can build wherever you want, and there's no like there's very few resource limitations there. Whereas Deep Rock, you got to do a lot of ammo management. It can be pretty stressful sometimes when you have to like juggle calling in a resupply pod while you've got a horde of enemies coming at you, and one of your friends is like bleeding out on the ground, which feels great. By the way, like that's peak moment for that kind of game.
Yeah, there are times where like it doesn't quite work out. Such is the nature of random generation, but I think for everything being as RNG as it is, I think it does a very
and
good
you gain
job.
a lot more from the random generation than you lose. Like that one occasional bad
sure.
mission is made up by the fact that most of them look amazing.
Yeah. And the other thing I wanted to mention too, you were talking about how like it's better for you in like shorter bursts, and for me, I can kind of play it all day. I think again that speaks to how like accessible the game is, because you can play this just like 1 or 2 matches a day and just like relax with some buddies and just have it be like a friendly little like you can crank the difficulty really low and just have it be kind of relaxing. But you could also play this game legitimately as like in the very like classic, Destiny looter shooter sense of like, oh, I'm going to grind for this cosmetic. I'm going to spend all day just like trying to acquire it and stuff like that. Like you can definitely play it that way if you want to, because it's also designed to be that way. Or you can just play it super casually and you'll have just as good of an experience. It's not forcing you in one direction or another, and it kind of balances those two play styles really well. Because there's so many things to unlock, and it's like a really straightforward process of just like, oh, you just have to play this mission with this difficulty, and like that's it. It's not. It's really simple, but it's there for people that really want to grind out and get all the cosmetics and spend all day on it. But it also doesn't have to be like that. So
yeah,
it strikes that balance really, really well. So, and also just so much personality. Like all the dwarves are hilarious. Their voice actors are just doing such a great job. They all have great little like sort of characterization. If you're like kind of messing around in your like launch bay ahead of a mission, there's so many like fun little things you can do. Like again, it's that kind of game where you can just sit back and relax with your buddies, where before you go out on a mission you can hit the jukebox and like dance for a bit and buy rounds of like drinks for everyone. It's
or you
great.
can like go run around, turn the gravity off in your little space station
Oh.
and jump around for a bit.
or like throw barrels around and go where you're not supposed to, and have your mission handler guy be like, "Hey, you're not supposed to be in there," and just like goof around. Like it doesn't take itself very serious.
Got a lot of heart, which is rare
Yeah.
in a lot of games lately. Is we've been getting a lot of games that don't have that just gamey bit of fun.
Yeah. And it's a lot of people, I completely agree with this sentiment as well. A lot of people who play this game and really enjoying it are calling it like the kind of like a live service done correctly, you know, where the only other thing you ever have to pay for is, I think there's like a pack, like a skin pack or something. And
Yeah, there's a couple of like cosmetic packs, but there's tons of cosmetics in the base game that are great. So,
but there's no like microtransactions that affect progression. All of the updates for the game have been free. It's a really great monetization system, and because it's such a solid game that came out as a finished product at launch, it sold really well and didn't have to rely on microtransactions in order to make money. And it's great. And it's also, I will mention, because I praised Hades for the same thing, it's also a early access success story. This game had its alpha 4 years ago. This game has been available for people to play as like an open or closed alpha and beta at various times for 4 years. And when it finally came out last year for its official 1.0 release, it was polished as heck. And all
that's
that
been
effort,
like a running theme lately. Have we been talking about a lot of games or early access success stories? This Project
Yeah.
Wingman, Hades.
I hear that Bannerlord has been working really well. As
Yeah,
like
it's not out yet,
sort
so we don't 100% know. But Bannerlord is an excellent game already. So,
but it's shaping up to be that anyway.
Yeah,
it's
100%.
gotten to the point where for the longest time, I've always had the attitude of I don't trust early access games because that's the reputation that it's gotten. But I'm starting to change my opinion on it because we've had so many awesome success stories as of late.
I mean, there's
Wasn't
a lot to be
Dungeon
said for like having a
another-
player base that gets to shape development of your game that are already
Yeah,
in,
and you
because
can
that
always-
guarantees you keep them around.
And you can always tell. You can always tell when a game was heavily based on community feedback because there's so many like pro consumer moves or like pro user experience things that I think come from that. So you can always tell when they're listening to their fans. So
All right. Hey, Alex, what have you been playing
Yes.
recently?
What have I been playing recently? I have been playing 2 games recently. One of which we've talked about a lot. That being Destiny 2.
Oh.
You guys remember how I said I was no longer playing PvP?
Mm-hmm.
Alex.
I lied. I lied, but it
Well,
was for a good
I'm used
cause.
to it at this point on this show.
It was for a good
Ryan.
cause.
Oh, okay.
Loot.
The best of causes.
Loot.
The greatest cause
Um,
is loot.
I played Trials this weekend,
Oh,
which is it's the most PvP of all PvP in Destiny, and I have dreaded going into it for so long.
it can get very
Because
sweaty.
It is it's sweaty. In my experience, it's where the vast majority of people cheating or using aimbot are. That or Gambit, which really, why would you do that in Gambit? There's no reason to do that. Anyway.
Comment sandwich for Destiny. We always have a comment sandwich.
Anyway, I played Trials enough to get the loot for the 3 wins. And it's fun when you play it with the right people.
Yes, agreed.
And my God, was it fun. Especially because, unfortunately now, I got a taste and I
The
want
taste
more.
for blood.
I got a taste for blood because apparently I'm becoming good at PvP. Somewhat. I'm definitely not tooting my horn. Good is not good enough. I'm not trying to be like a pro Destiny player or anything like that. But and kind of bragging at this point. We wiped the
Go
floor
for it.
with the first 2 matches we had in trials, and there's nothing that really will quite give me that feeling of power again. And then, as to be expected, we got the next 3 games that we did. We got wiped the floor with, except
Sounds
for
like
the last
us.
one because we had to win 3 to get the loot. So that was it. But yeah, fun with the right people.
Yeah.
And also, I believe it was last night. We took a new player friend through their first raid, and we did Last Wish, and we tried to do Riven legit for
Oh,
some reason.
interesting. Okay.
Um, and this was also the first time that I tried to do Riven legit as well. And the set pieces are so cool when you first see them. After 15 times failing, it does get old. So we did
Mhm.
end up resorting to the cheese, but it's always fun seeing someone's first raid experience.
Yeah.
It's a blessing and a curse because you want to get their reactions in real time, but also when they don't know what you're doing and you have to redo something multiple times because of that, it can get a little.
Yeah. I also
That's
got
not
to
their
work.
fault. It's just-
I also, because they loved standing in the way of bullets, I got to work on my Lumina Catalyst, which
Oh,
is
okay.
the healing gun in Destiny. Um, so yeah,
Fun.
there's
Yeah,
that. And
I've
then
been going back and like playing a bit more of Destiny because I hadn't really touched it since Shadowkeep came out after the sunsetting, and I gotta say that I was concerned that the new player experience would be really really bad. They did a better job of at least the returner experience being pretty good. Of like you get immediately introduced to a new cinematic mission and some cool stasis powers and whatnot.
well, hey, sunsetting has been sunset, Ryan.
Oh, I know. Yeah, sunsetting has been sunset. Um, I still miss the Red War. It was a fun
I use
campaign.
the
I miss
stones.
Menagerie.
It
Or
was
the
super
stones.
cheesy, but I liked it.
I miss Menagerie.
Same here, Wyatt.
But I gotta say,
Same
there's
here.
some cool hooks for returner. I don't know how well they would work on someone who hasn't played Destiny before because it relied on a lot of like weird Destiny 1 lore.
Yeah, I'll
Which
still
was
say
interesting,
my last dig at them. Shahan looks simultaneously like he could be in a frat and be bullied by them. I
Hey,
do not respect
sometimes
him as a man or a piece of code.
that is the best kind of character. Just disaster people. Anything else?
The other game that I've been playing has been The Elder Scrolls 3 Morrowind.
Ooh,
Um,
classic.
Oh, interesting.
why? Because I wanted to feel some clunky combat, but not really because I don't know, maybe it is still very clunky because I have not been doing any melee combat at all or ranged. I'm just a cheesy spellcaster and it's fun. And I like the very open-ended story things. Well, the much less waypointy world exploration.
Yeah,
It's very refreshing.
I definitely agree
And
with that.
I've lost track of so many quests. God help
Morrowind is
me, my
a
journal is
really,
full.
really interesting experience going back after playing a lot of modern games because it's interesting to see
Yeah.
how much it does differently. And it just has like a different philosophy to design, which is very interesting to see.
Yeah.
A refreshing
it does.
game. Did you find the Scroll of Flight and try to use it yet?
I found them. I have not used them yet because I've also been cheesing levitation through almost the entire game. Just because it's faster than walking.
Well, see, that's the fun with Morrowind is it's a game that's kind of like built to be cheesed.
It is
Which is awkward to say,
absolutely Swiss.
but it is like meant to be treated in that way of like just
I
find
mean, most
every
Bethesda
exploit you can.
games, a lot of people just find enjoyment out of just breaking them.
They are
But
begging to be
Morrowind
abused.
supports it. Like Morrowind actively encourages you to break every aspect of it with like the
Yes.
spell crafting
Yes.
system and all the really really cool encounters you can have with it. Especially because like there are enemies in that game that can trounce you no matter what if you don't.
Oh yeah.
So it's a fun design philosophy where they're just like, here, break the game more than we already broke it to try and kill you.
That really is how it is.
It's fun. It like turns it into a puzzle to solve, which is a really cool approach to that RPG style design. Of like, it's not really about your stats and your level. It's more about, can you think through this in a way that will get you through the problem? Which like that's classic D&D thinking. Of like, can I come up with a weird solution to this problem that might involve some strange reality breaking exploits, but hey, it'll be fun.
Funny you should mention the D&D way of thinking, because that's almost exactly how I have my spells laid out
Yeah,
for my wizard. Just like the hotkeys are different spell slots essentially,
it's a lot of fun to
because
play
of
that
how
way.
much magic that they use up. I mean, wow.
They had to
I
put a
made
limit on it
legit
somehow.
fireball.
Yeah, I think Bethesda games are always the kind of games that like they don't tend to be 10 out of 10s, but they age extremely well.
Well,
like-
you can make them 10 out of 10s if you mod them enough and if you break them enough.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
I still need to get the Nexus mods up and running so that I can get rid of that fog.
Like I'll still say like base Morrowind is still fun to play. Base Skyrim on Switch is great. Like Skyrim
on the Switch
holds up surprisingly well. It's not the deepest game, but like if you just want to spend 100 hours adventuring and just doing fun fantasy things, Skyrim's got your back. Like
if you want like a classic like medieval fantasy video game, it's really hard to argue with Skyrim.
Yeah, because there's not much else.
Honestly.
Surprisingly, like fantasy in games, people often think of it, but it's pretty rare to see like actual high fantasy games that are even semi good. We got like Kingdoms of Amalur, we got Skyrim, and that's like
Dragon Age.
No, Dragon Age is
well,
like
also ones that
gritty,
really
low
like.
fantasy.
Well, also like ones that really like make use of their world and their lore too. Like I feel like that's another big thing.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
All right. Anything else you want to say about Morrowind?
It's just a really fun experience. There's so much there is a lot of reading involved, but there's such a quality story to it as well. And you should pick it up because it's usually $5 or less. Even
It's
when
also
there's not a
been
sale.
free a couple of times, so you might own it already. If you have Game Pass, you can play it. Because Bethesda's everything is on Game Pass now. So
Oh yeah.
Almost everything. Almost.
everything that
What's
is
not?
on like modern hardware is on Game Pass.
Well, isn't it like is it Doom 2016 isn't on Game Pass? Or Doom?
I think Doom 2016 is. I'm
there
like
was one omission that
pretty
I was
certain.
like shocked by that
some of the
wasn't there.
DLC isn't because
Huh.
Oh no,
Game
I was
Pass
talking about a
doesn't
main
have DLC.
game. Anyway, it doesn't really matter. Look, everything that mostly everything you would want is on there. That's the point.
Yeah, if there's an omission, it's probably something you can pick up pretty easily somewhere else.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah, most of the
Too
Bethesda
bad I don't have
catalog is
Xbox.
in this. Well,
I am a PlayStation boy and PC.
actually, Wyatt, you might be
Anyway.
right. It might be Doom 2016. Now that I'm looking, I don't see Doom
Huh.
2016. on here.
Wow, Wyatt's right. Isn't that just crazy?
You know,
That's an interesting omission. Now I'm curious about that.
No, that's what I was saying. It's a weird thing to because they have Doom
actually,
Eternal.
I might know why. Doom 2016 had that weird requirement for the Bethesda launcher, didn't it?
But didn't Fallout 76 also have that?
I know the Game Pass version doesn't. It might be that Doom 2016 is old enough they didn't feel like they had to do that.
wait, this isn't the thing where you needed the like online subscription to get to
No.
the first original Doom, was it?
No, it was just like
No.
weird external DRM thing. Yeah, that is weird. Doom 2016 is not on Game Pass, but everything else is. So Doom 2016 is on sale pretty often as well. It's probably some weird licensing stuff. Yeah, most everything else is. All right, I got a game to bring up that Brett is gonna hate me for bringing up because I know he's playing it right now and is gonna instantly wish he was here, and that is Narita Boy.
Nope.
I've been
What?
hearing some things about it. Yep.
So there's a
I'm hearing
little
some-
game called Narita Boy, which is also available on Game Pass because Game Pass is like the greatest thing. Just get more positive about it the more I have it. It is a almost like Super Brothers Sword and Sorcery style indie game of like weird story, cool aesthetic. It's a lot more visceral because
Well, it's a very different kind of game, though.
Oh, absolutely. I'm just meaning like to get people in the right headspace. I think that's the similar kind of.
I would say
story they're
art
trying to tell.
style is very much so. Is very similar.
Yeah, I'm talking a lot more about like the way they tell the narrative is very similar to Super Brothers.
Okay.
Which is interesting because like not a lot of indie games go that route. It's like that and Hyper Light Drifter are the closest things I can think of. And it's a really
cool.
really cool like 80s CRT themed Tron style. I hesitate to call it a Metroidvania because it doesn't really feel like that, but like action platformer is probably
I was gonna say
a better term for now.
From the screenshots I'm seeing, it looks like either an action platformer or sometimes just a side-scrolling beat 'em up.
Yeah, so I was only able to
Slash
play
'em up.
about like 45 minutes of it before my Xbox controller died. I need to get a new one
Oh.
because Game Pass right now, I either need to do that or download the DS4 Windows.
That's just a feature of the video game. It's a meta commentary.
Yeah, it's a meta commentary
on the player's input and digital interactive experiences.
Yep, Psycho Mantis. All right. But yeah, my Xbox pad has died, so I have to figure out a way to get my PS4.
The game was too powerful for your Xbox controller.
You enjoyed The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time, don't you?
Yeah, it is really, really solid, at least from the bit that I played. I haven't played very much, so I don't know if it gets worse or anything, but I've heard a lot of good about it, and it's super interesting, so I just want to give it a little bit of a quick shout-out on the show, since I know Brett will hate me for mentioning it without him. That's the goal.
You got to make it Brett's personal hell in some way.
You know what? That's my new answer for the starting game of what Brett would hate the most is us mentioning Narita Boy without him here. All right. So I do think there's some interesting other games that I've been playing recently. I think Wyatt, you might have some stuff to say about Outriders as well.
I want to leave it mostly to you because you've been playing it a lot more than I have, and it's I just
because I think you and I are gonna agree on the initial impressions the game gave were not very good.
No, they weren't terrible. They were very
middling is probably a good way to put it. Like,
yeah, it's just the most like the word I would use to describe the experience of playing the game was just average. Like everything felt very by the numbers, like average.
And we talked about this a little bit before. I think Wyatt and I both basically agreed that like we felt it wasn't really worth our time. The demo was just kind of okay and not great. It had some tech issues. The stuttering was weird. This is the game that I have done the biggest 180 on, I think, ever. Like, I've done 180s on games before. Monster Hunter is one of my favorite franchises now, but the first time I played it, I did not like the game at all. And then I bounced around.
Days Gone is another example from what I remember.
Yeah, Days Gone I liked as soon as I started playing it. The marketing is what made me think I wouldn't like it, not the game itself.
Oh, okay.
I kind of like instantly liked Days Gone once I started to play it, but definitely Monster Hunter was a franchise that I bounced off pretty hard the first time I played it because I was like, oh, it's clunky, it doesn't work, I don't know what I'm doing. Bounced off it, came back like a year later, and immediately realized that I was just stupid. And couldn't figure out what buttons did.
Are you waiting to see if that happens with me at all? I'm curious.
I don't think so. I think your issue is less of that because usually when people have that reaction to Monster Hunter, they drop it really quickly. Like they can't make it past the first couple.
In my
of
defense, I did give it a good.
Yeah, you made it quite a few big monsters in before dropping. So I think. Yeah. I think it's more that you don't really like the loop as much as other people do. Which is fine. Like that loop is not going to work for everybody, but for me, the loop of hunting monsters, like mastering a fight to see how quickly you can do it, it's very fighting game-esque in how it works, which is great. It means you get a really really solid like experience of getting better at the game, which is something that I love. Like that's why I like Dark Souls. It's why I like difficult, challenging games, because they give you that experience of like having to overcome something hard. Like it's not that there's a shortcut. You just gotta figure out how to do it, which is great. Like Monster Hunter is really really good at that. But I hated it at first. I didn't like it. It wasn't good. But I didn't hate it as much as I was like. I thought Outriders was just bad. Like I was like close to comparing it to Anthem.
Well, also especially comparing to what the studio's done in the past, and they've done some awesome work in the past.
And like People Can Fly is a super great studio. So
it's like whenever I talk about Bulletstorm, all I say is like it's awesome. Like that's all you can really say about it. It's awesome.
It's sheer video game dopamine.
Yeah.
So I ended up I after hearing reactions from people and like player impressions that were like, this game is really solid, I was like, okay, maybe I need to give this demo another try and like really try to get the game and not play like brute force it like I was trying to brute force it. And what I did is I picked a different class. I went with Trickster, which is like their melee, up close and personal run around, do some cool like time warpy stuff, instead of the like Technomancer that I'd been playing, which was kind of like the sit and cover class. So I was running around doing that, and then something clicked. Like something just clicked of the way the game handles healing and whatnot, promotes aggression in a way kind of like Doom 2016, where the way you heal and everything is by pushing forward. You're not gonna staying in cover is not gonna help you basically ever unless you're the class that benefits from being in cover. Everyone else just needs to go straight in, try to murder as many things as possible. Trickster heals whenever something dies in close range. So what I was doing is trying to get like as close as possible to enemies, use a sword that turns them into bones that then pop.
It's bone popping time.
It is one of the most satisfying visual effects I've ever seen in a shooter. Where the like enemy literally just like degrades into dust and then explodes, and it's incredible. It's super satisfying. And what I started to realize is that you got to play that game like you're playing Diablo, not like you're playing a shooter. It is not a shooter. It is an action RPG. The game might present itself as a shooter, which is a kind of an issue because it means a lot of people that I think tried that demo bounced off pretty hard because they were expecting more of a like Division or Destiny competitor. What it really feels like, having gotten to like the loot game now, and the way they handle crafting, where you can like dismantle the legendary items you find and take their like legendary effects and then put them on any gun in the game. After that point, so like I found a legendary sniper rifle that if you headshot someone, freezes every enemy in the radius. And I was like, well, this seems like it'd be really really cool if I put that on a assault rifle and froze everything in a radius but way more. And you can do that, and it's really fun. So I think it's one of those weird games where like you got to have it click, because the way the game kind of presents itself isn't the same as it is. And weirdly, I don't think it's the marketing, because I went back and looked at some of their marketing stuff and was like, that's how they bill it. They sell it to you as more of an action RPG than a shooter, legitimately. Mm-hmm. So I think it's a case of like maybe the marketing wasn't super visible, and I just kind of went in because it was a demo that I wanted to try. I was like, hey, maybe it'll be fun. And then didn't like it because I tried to play it wrong, like just really, really badly. But going in now, I've been having a ton of fun just doing cool stuff in the game, like messing with builds. They make a lot of really good choices, like you can reset your skills at any point instead of having to use like a currency or something. You just reset them. So if your build's not working, you just go reset it and then try something different. Which is really great for the difficulty curve, because it means like a lot of the time the answer is just you need to go look at your build and maybe like you're not using things you should be using, or you realize you've built for like a different type of skill than the one that you've been running with. So I did that and like messed around a bunch and got some really really cool combos to work. And that's really rare to see in an action game, especially shooters. Is like most shooters on the market have this philosophy of you can use your one special ability once a minute, and then you gotta wait another minute until you can use your one special ability again. I'm looking at you, Borderlands. And Destiny's kind of similar, of like you have to wait a long time for those cooldowns, and like that works.
It used to be
You
longer.
can
It used to
make
be
builds.
way longer.
No, you can make builds to
Exactly,
wait a
but
much
like you got to
shorter
build
period
for
of
it.
time, but
You got to like
there's builds and exotics for it.
consciously go for that.
Yeah.
Whereas with Outriders, it is every skill in the game. Like the longest cooldown I saw is 30 seconds. And that was for a skill that like exists on the field for 10 seconds, so it's way less time in reality.
Ooh.
So it was the kind of thing where like looking through I had an ability that let me teleport behind an enemy that I could do once every 8 seconds. Combine that with the sword I have that's got 2 charges and recharges in 10 seconds. It means I can teleport around the field, melee enemies, and then teleport away and like run around everywhere. So the cooldowns are just like super generous, and it means you get to really, really play with your skill set and not just kind of meander around waiting for cooldowns most of the time.
Mm-hmm.
Ryan, you're making
really
this
satisfying.
very hard for me to wait until the bugs are patched and
He's a
it's lower
secret-
price.
He's just a secret like salesman for it, just like I'm actually a secret salesman for Deep Rock Galactic.
Yep.
So.
I mean, my thing is I just love, like, looter shooters are a genre that I always have wanted to really like, but have never liked as much as I think I could have, because they tend to make a lot of active decisions that are more in favor of FPS gameplay than loot gameplay. Of like, Borderlands has great guns, but the rest of the game is less interesting. Like, the skill trees are a lot of very small bonuses. It's not stuff that's really affecting how you play during the game loop, whereas Outriders, like, if I swap a skill around, I now play completely differently. Like, if I change my teleport around for the skill where I get, like, a bunch of armor and then can trace or jump back to where I was 10 seconds ago, that fundamentally changes how I'm going to play the game, because, like, I can't teleport across the map, but I'm a lot more survivable, because I can constantly get out of jail free. Like, so it's really, really different based on how you're building your character. And then the fact that, like, blue items in that game, like the second tier of rarity, are about the equivalent of a Destiny exotic, are a little insane. Like, I found a
That's right, 'cause you said-
regular... Go ahead.
That's right, because you said they didn't have to worry about the PvP balance.
Exactly, there's no PvP
it.
balance, so everything is just insane. It's just like, do as much explosions as you possibly can.
Which is very similar to how Borderlands does things, where it's just every gun is crazy insanity.
Yeah. I'd say this is slightly less insane than Borderlands with the gun variety, but the amount of viable guns is a lot more. Like, Borderlands, there's a lot of trash that comes your way, whereas Outriders,
but a lot of fun
almost...
trash, to be fair.
Yeah, but if
Like-
you're playing at a difficulty that's fairly hard, that fun trash
Yes.
is just unusable.
Yes.
And it's also, if you find a gun you really like, you can't keep it at your level. Whereas Outriders gives you plenty of crafting and materials and whatnot to make sure if you find a gun you really like, you can keep using it for as long as you want, because you can just keep updating it. You can also dismantle it. And whenever you dismantle something that has a like weapon mod, you get to keep that mod to put on something else. And it's not like you put it on one thing and you're done. It's you can put it on as many things as you want. I could load it. I could make every single gun in my inventory now have the explosive frost bullets of that exotic sniper rifle, because I unlocked it. I dismantled it, so I have that thing forever. Which is really, really cool.
I think, like, unfortunately, another thing that kind of killed it for me, and I've seen some of it in other gameplay that I've seen, but like the beginning area that the demo had was just so boring to me. And I've seen some of the other areas that you go to further on in the game, and they do look a lot more interesting. But I think that's one thing that killed it for me, is just like this starting area is like really boring.
So the thing for me is that you are not in one area for more than an hour, basically ever. Like, Alex was there earlier today where I was playing, and I was like, yeah, I thought I was about halfway through the game, because I was looking at the map, and like on the map I was like halfway through. And then I tried the scroll wheel, and the map scrolled an entire full other map length to the other side of the screen. And I was like, I'm not nearly as far into this game as I thought I was. And I have already seen tons of unique areas. And the great thing, every side quest has its own area. Nothing is sending you back to like the main story areas. You're always going to like old to new sections of the area with like different things.
I did like that, where it didn't feel like Destiny, where they reuse areas for.
And like, I thought that would go away. I have yet to encounter a single side quest that even has the same combat arena as a different quest. Like none of them even have the same. They're not even taking you through the same places to get to a place. Like it's the kind of thing where like every single thing has its area. There's tons of like boss fights that are optional. And the really cool thing that I keep hearing is the end game like Diablo style Greater Rift-esque system of expeditions is also in completely new areas that aren't ones you see in the story. And I'm just like, how did you make this? Like, what? Where did you get the resources to do this? Because I've seen like 20
How many
different
artists'
environments at
lives
this point.
did you have to ruin to make these assets?
Yeah, it's ludicrous. But the game's
Why
got a
haven't
lot
they
of
seen
tech
their
issues right
families?
now. The game's got some major tech issues on PC right now that none of them are nearly as bad as something like Cyberpunk's launch of like the game's totally playable. But there's this obnoxious issue where the first time you go from the main menu to the playing as your character, the HUD vanishes. All you got to do to fix it is go back to the main menu and then back in, which takes like 5 seconds. But it's just weird. It's like, why is
But it
that?
shouldn't be happening at all. Let's be honest.
Why is that happening? And there's stuff like the performance is not quite as good as it should be because DX12 is apparently broken on it. And like DLSS makes it chug harder than not having DLSS on, which is really, really confusing. So there's some weird tech issues. None of them are that major, but like combined, they make it a lot less fun if you're having to contend with a lot of them. There were some server issues on launch. I didn't pick the game up at launch, so I don't know how bad that was. But as of now, it seems fine. I haven't been disconnected at all for the entire time I've played the game, so I have not seen that issue happen. But it's been a lot of fun, and I think it's a game that I can solidly recommend as one of the quintessential 7 out of 10 video games. of like Earth Defense Force, it's a game that ticks a lot of boxes that I personally enjoy, which means I have a ton of fun playing it, but there are definitely some glaring issues that are not amazing, but they're the kind of things that are like back end. The gameplay is great, but some of this weird like side stuff of the map isn't always super clear. The menus can be a little bit strange looking sometimes. It's just like little things that are like maybe not quite right, but a lot of it definitely works really well, which is refreshing to see. And the big thing, it's a looter shooter that is not a live service game. It has no microtransactions. It just launched. That shouldn't be a revolutionary idea, but it is.
Yeah, you said it was the full thing.
Yeah, it's the whole game, whole story, a bunch of post-game stuff. It is basically like Diablo 3 style. The game is done. It is launched, it's done.
What a
DLC
concept.
that happens will be expansions or like actual proper paid DLC that is like you get new areas, new loot, new systems to play with. It's not the constant drip feed of tiny amounts of content that a lot of live service games do.
Right, I have to stop you there. Are you telling me that the game that you paid money for was, I'm trying to wrap my head around this, completed?
Was
at
like a
launch?
finished video game?
Like a finished product.
Wyatt, I know that is heresy in this day and age to say.
That's literally
But
incredible.
Yes.
That is insane. That's inconceivable. That's heresy.
Fool me once from last episode. Shame on you. Fool me twice from last episode. Shame on me. Fool me 3 times. It's not happening. It's not happening. I don't believe you.
It is
because it can't happen.
Wild that I'm playing a multiplayer game in this day and age that is actually not a live service.
Because of how much we've hurt you in the past, I don't actually know if you're joking, Wyatt.
I do not believe him.
Oh,
I simply refuse.
Oh no!
Hey, more action RPG fun for me. I'll go around with my gun that shoots fireworks and put the shield that instantly kills people.
Do you think after the crap you pulled on our April Fool's episode that you're just gonna
Wyatt, can you honestly tell me that you expected to go to an April Fool's Day episode of this show and not have something happen?
You know what I do find funny? we did not stream on April Fool's Day, nor did we upload that episode on April Fool's Day. That's the funniest
we
part of
uploaded
all.
that highlight on April Fool's Day of that. That was our April Fool's Day video. Is that section of the podcast.
But it's no longer fooling anyone. Anyone watching. How dare you?
It was the April Fool. All right.
Also, I'm just completely messing with you right now.
Oh, I know. It's just hilarious. Look, this is the chill episode. We can do whatever we want. We don't have rules here. Well, we do have some rules, but we don't have a lot of rules.
We can't mention anything naughty, Ben.
Yeah, we're business casual. So yeah, Outriders has just been really refreshing to play because it is a game that I had not realized how long it had been since I just played a game that is done at launch. Like, there's some bugs, yes, but the content complete
beforehand.
Well, Deep Rock is still a live service game though. Like, it's a game that's actively getting updates, which is great.
Right, but for the amount that you pay for it, it's enough. Like, even if they never added to it again.
Yeah, but it is refreshing to play a game that I know, like, what I am getting now is the intended experience 100%. Like, this is what they wanted this game to be, and they nailed it. Like, for the ARPG style of it. There's minor things, like, it's clear that the cover system is not as good as it could have been, but I think that's because they probably realized midway through that, like, they don't want you to be using it most of the time.
It feels very, like, early 2000s cover system.
Yeah, it feels like the Division 1 in a day and age where Division 2
exists. I would say the Division 1 was better because it was more...
Division 1, the cover system is almost exactly the same with one major difference. Of Division 1, the enemies are a little bit less accurate, so when you're moving from cover to cover, you're way less likely to take damage. Which is like my one little gameplay complaint right now about Outriders is the human enemies are a little bit aimbotty. So it can mean you gotta kind of, if you're playing super aggressive and in the face of things, it's not a problem. But if you're like trying to retreat to reload, it becomes an issue of like, you gotta run around and like not get hit.
I did notice that as soon as I left cover, it was just constant fire.
Yeah, it's the kind of thing where it feels like enemies need to be just toned down tiny bit. Just walk back like one notch on the little list of like things so they're not hitting you quite as often. But that's a super minor complaint. All right, so that's our Outriders talk. There's one other game that I've been playing recently. It's called Final Fantasy 14.
Wait, you play Final Fantasy 14?
I play Final Fantasy, Wyatt? I'd never heard of myself playing Final Fantasy. I don't know where you got that from.
I've been duped.
Yeah, but I'm the Final Fantasy expert on
this
you're
the Final Fantasy expert.
I know everything there is to know about Gun Arm Man and blonde spiky big sword hair boy.
And
I think you
weird
mean
mouthpiece
Mithril
Mike.
And Mithril.
Yep. All right. Yeah, so Final Fantasy 14, the reason I bring it up is because like there's often it's a kind of MMO where it's just consistently high quality. And that's very rare to see in MMOs where it's very little fluff. Like, there's so much stuff to do in the game that's all very varied. And I'm starting to, as I get further into the game, of like I finally hit Heaven's Ward, I'm doing the expansion storylines. There's full voice acting now. It is hitting the point of being like great. Whereas before, like the story was really interesting. They've pulled some things with the story recently that have really kind of like outdone themselves.
In a good way.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Like they are raising the bar from what I expect for Final Fantasy to the point where I am concerned now that Final Fantasy 16 will just be less good, which is insane because it's by the same people. So at least being produced by the director of 16, which is good to hear. But yeah, that game has just been great recently, and there's a lot of really cool stuff happening leading up to the next expansion launching. So it's a fun game to be in right now. To kind of see all the weird Final Fantasy nerds doing their thing. Like helping me trick Alex.
You absolute. God,
you want to finish
fantastic.
that sentence there?
I can't. we're doing business casual, but that was fantastic. Really.
Yeah, that was the long con. That was. And not even Brett knew about that one. That was an interesting time. But yeah, 14's been getting really, really interesting lately. They've added some really cool stuff to like PvP, which usually I hate PvP in most games. But 14's PvP is weirdly fun when you're playing like the 72 versus 72 versus 72 player mode, where it's just 3 massive teams of people running into each other. It's great. It's impossible to tell what's going on because there's so many effects everywhere, but it is very fun to look at. So yeah, it's been an interesting experience playing that game. And of course, Project Wingman again. Just go play Project Wingman. To everyone listening to the show, we did an episode yesterday. It should be out. It was out a few days ago now. Real good. Go play Project Wingman. All right, that's it. I did it. I shilled Project Wingman.
Your daily dose, weekly dose.
Weekly dose of what, Alex? Are you trying to drug me here?
Shilling Project Wingman.
Ah, yeah. Well, I had to do. Brett gave me like a list of demands for when he's done on the show, and shilling Project Wingman is numbers 1 through 20. So
Brett is actually in the room with you right now, holding a gun to your head to make sure that you mention it. That's why he's not.
So that's why we don't have cams on.
Yeah.
Exactly. Brett is the one that really runs things behind the scenes, and he forces us to talk about things. So,
well, Brett writes the script, so
Brett's the script.
he scripted every conversation we had. It's sometimes hard to tell because we're so bumbling and buffoonish that it's difficult to tell that all of this is just an act, and we're actually extremely professional.
It's my little character that I like to add
actors
on
that
to
make
it.
this sound natural.
There are absolutely no sections on the script that Brett has written that say ad lib, but against his wishes, I do tend to add a little stutter in there, just like that for a little character development.
And he's benevolent to it because it keeps working.
Yeah. Well, it's because those little touches make it seem like we're not scripted. So
please, if we don't get enough views, he's gonna cancel me. I only exist on this format.
Do you have any reason to cancel you?
No, he wouldn't.
Look, Alex, we just got to take you over to where Burnout is, and a lot of EA, Dead Space is hanging out back there. You're gonna love it. It's a great little back room.
No, I'm sorry.
In the EA offices.
No.
If there's a fate that no one should ever have to endure, it's the fate of Burnout and Dead Space.
Yeah, no, that's definitely true.
That's a fate worse than death right there.
That's a fate worse than a lot of things. It is truly hard to compare to. But guess what? We did it. We made it through our what have we been doing for the week section of the show, and it's only an hour and a half in.
Look at that.
We've managed to not run for 2 hours this time. It's incredible.
I'm so proud of us.
Look, we're very time conscious of our viewers.
We know they have so many better things to do than to listen to us. We're self-aware like that.
Mm-hmm. Yup. Definitely.
We're doing their production work.
No.
I am staring at the person listening to this.
But we've gotten through our topics early, which means we can talk about some of the news stories that were rejected at the start for being too out there.
Oh.
Too wild.
Too out there,
too unrelated to anything that we were doing. In that, Wyatt, I think you specifically are going to love this news topic.
That either means I'm going to just absolutely love it unconditionally, or it's going to make me want to die. So please, go ahead.
So there's a little game company known as Xbox, aka Microsoft.
Absolutely minuscule. Don't know them. Cool.
It's a little known company by the name of Microsoft.
More, the fact that you called it little, or the fact that you called it Xbox.
Look, well, it's the Xbox division of Microsoft that is doing this. So
okay.
So why? There's been a trend on YouTube recently of people that do YouTube that aren't people. They're personas known as VTubers. So I'm sure you're aware of the
I'm all
VTuber
caught up on all
apocalypse.
the most popular VTubers. Definitely, that's
Yep.
me.
Definitely. You know all of them by name.
Yes, and I actually have access. They know me personally. We know each other on a deep, very personal level.
Incredible.
And I have all of them on speed dial.
Yep. All right. So I'm sure then you've heard that sorry, these names surprise me.
I'll make look. Just say it, and then I'll tell you if you got the name right.
It's a Shishiro Boten and Himemori
that's
Luna are two VTubers that have been hired by Xbox to shill Game Pass in Japan.
I love that so much. That is wonderful.
So for those who don't know, these VTubers are part of something called HoloLive, and HoloLive is basically a cult. It is a company that is like akin to what an idol agency in like Japan or South Korea is like. Not nearly as like scummy as a lot of those agencies are, but basically people can like apply with their character to be a HoloLive idol, which are these VTubers that basically get a ton of marketing and a lot of support and whatnot, and tend to become very popular very quickly. So these two VTubers are part of HoloLive and have been hired out to showcase the perks of Game Pass, including gameplay from Gears of War, Control, Microsoft Flight Simulator, and Forza Horizon.
Them Xbox boys got the finger on the pulse of what's hip. Gotta say.
You know, I'm gonna put the link to this article in our podcast chat so that you guys can see what this looks like, because I think you're gonna enjoy the appearance of these people. the infinite wisdom of the VTuber Game Pass advertisements is great. This just it warms my heart.
The two VTubers that I guess know at a passing glance are like there's one that's a shark and one that's a dog, I think.
I don't know. I'm behind on my VTuber lore. I know it's surprising that the JRPG person is behind on VTuber lore, but
who are these virtual women?
these silly virtual characters. Yeah, so it's interesting to think that now we're in the era of VTubers advertising video game subscription services.
It feels like a really quick turnaround for something that's so new, you know? Like usually it takes capitalism. A while. But no, but even for like capitalism's sake, it takes a while for these things to
The interesting thing is like it's not as new as it seems, because like Kizuna Ai is the VTuber that most people know because she went viral a long time ago. That's been years. Like she's been a thing since I think at least 4 years ago. So they're not as new as they seem. I think HoloLive is relatively new compared to that, but even then, like they're not super new in Japan. They're new in America. Mm-hmm. So it's more that like we haven't been as exposed to this side of YouTube culture. And it's important to note like these are advertisements that are happening in Japan, not in America. So trying to reach a wider audience, because Xbox has like a historically difficult time in Japan of just not really being a huge
almost every
console.
Xbox has sold horribly.
Yeah, pitifully in Japan. And a lot of that is just like Japan loves portable consoles because of just the lifestyle there. It's a lot more friendly to portable consoles than places like America and Europe generally are.
Well, also because of all the big three like major studios that develop hardware, they're the only one that's not based in Japan.
Yeah, you know? They don't have tons of Japanese presence, and I think it's also the lack of Japanese studios that are involved. Japan likes buying things that are made by fellow Japanese people. I mean, it's the same for every country. Is they tend to like things that are made by people from that culture. So
they have been making an effort, a much bigger effort, I think, the last few years to rectify that. But it's going to take a lot of work to.
Well, I mean, Xbox acquired Scarlet Nexus, so they're producing at least one big budget Japanese game, and the Yakuza being on Game Pass, I'm sure, is helping with that.
Well, what was surprising to me is when they debuted Metal Gear Solid 5 at the Xbox show, if you remember, which was surprising.
Yeah, Metal Gear Solid's a weird one because it's about as popular in America as it is in Japan. Like it's a franchise that is not really as tied to the culture, just because of how it's often like the Japanese take on American history is really interesting. Because it tends to be very exaggerated and use a lot of like allegory and whatnot, and that's just super cool to see. It's a very different type of game, so I think that appeals a lot to Western players
counterpoint. Another game that debuted on Xbox, I believe, was Devil May Cry 5. That was another one that debuted at an Xbox show, which I also felt was...
Devil May Cry is also huge in the West. Like those are two games that are not as Japan centric as something like Final Fantasy. Like
that is also fair. You know
Final
what? I'm
Fantasy's
just gonna stop talking.
You're talking to the person that is super into Japanese games. Devil May Cry is one
I
of my
will
favorite
defer to your judgment
franchises.
always in this regard. So
yeah, part of it I think is Devil May Cry is just like Devil May Cry was huge in the early 2000s in America. Like that's why we got that weird American Devil May Cry remake.
Oh,
from Ninja Theory.
No. You're calling it. You're not naming it correctly. It's DMC
Devil May Cry. Yeah,
which is the actual title.
I still don't get it. It still doesn't make sense to me. Because that implies that they're two separate phrases.
No. Well, that's like you say it out loud. It's like, did no one?
Well, maybe it's Devil May
Did
Devil May Cry.
Like, did no one notice that it was called DMC Devil May Cry?
I would just rather play DMX's Devil May Cry. So yeah, it's a interesting situation that we're getting more global games from Xbox. Especially games that have more of that traditional Japanese aesthetic that you would expect, like Scarlet Nexus. Because that type of art style tends to not be super popular in the West. I think for like logical reasons, it's just not as familiar to a lot of people here, and it doesn't age as nicely a lot of the time. So it's interesting to see more of that. It'll be fun, hopefully. I'm hoping Scarlet Nexus comes out good. But it just warms my heart that these VTubers are advertising Game Pass in the distant land of Japan.
Because more people need Game Pass. Because it's wonderful.
Look, more people need to play the Yakuza games, which are on Game Pass. So,
wait, you play Yakuza?
I don't actually play Yakuza. I just watch Yakuza.
No, you just shill it for Microsoft. You don't actually play it.
Yeah. I get the big bucks to shill. Yeah. Yakuza.
You're like, yeah, Yakuza, whatever. The fact that it's on Game Pass, that's what's so exciting about it.
Yeah, Yakuza doesn't matter. It's just Game Pass has Yakuza. Did you know that?
They have it in their clutches. It's theirs.
Yeah, and there is one fairly major news story we hadn't talked about yet, which is that the PlayStation 3, PSP, and PS Vita stores are all shutting down very soon.
Yep.
Oh.
Yep. Rest in peace.
So
the Vita is, like, to me, one of the saddest hardware stories in video game history.
Well, because it has some incredible games.
Not only that, but it was hardware that was so ahead of its time. Like,
there's an Uncharted game exclusive to the Vita, isn't there?
And you know what?
Too.
It's pretty good. It was really damn good. It wasn't even made by Naughty Dog. It was made by Bend.
Really?
Yeah.
Huh.
It was the first, because I actually bought a Vita when it came out back in the day, and it was the first Vita game I ever played. And in fact, now that I think about it, it's the first Uncharted game that I ever played, because I didn't have a PS3 back in the day. So,
I mean, this is actually interesting too, because it reminded me that the PSP store still is up.
Yeah. But just, again, like I was saying, from a hardware perspective, it was so ahead of its time. I mean, I feel like so many of the things that the Switch has now were at least inspired by the PSP. Its overall design and its aspirations of being like a fully fledged, like super powerful, like handheld system. its like touchscreen integrations, the way it kind of works with other Sony product. I don't know. I just what a great system.
The big sad thing about this is that we're starting to hit the point where emulation hasn't caught up yet with stores that are closing, which means like when the PS Vita goes, a lot of games are going with it.
Yep.
That are really high quality. Like Muramasa Rebirth is like a phenomenal action game that's only available on PSP. There's some really good versions of Metal Gear that are on PSP.
Yep.
Soul Sacrifice is one of the most interesting franchises I think I've ever played, and that's just on PSP and PS Vita. So very, very sad to be seeing all these go.
What the heck is that game? It was like a it was almost like it reminded everyone of Attack on Titan because you had like guns and different weapons, but you also had like grappling hooks and you had to fight different
I know
something wars.
Freedom Wars.
Freedom Wars. Another great game that is so good that I remember the title of.
And all those games.
Tearaway
is one of those classic like Monster Hunter clones. Tearaway is on PS4, so that at least isn't going away forever.
Well, not exactly. Tearaway on PS4 is a slightly different version than what was on the.
Well, yeah, because like you can't put Tearaway's original controls on PS4. As much as I would love to see them attempt that,
but alas,
funny. But yeah, that's definitely a big miss. So there have been rumors that the reason all these stores are closing, because like it makes sense that the PSP store is closing after all this time. It's been more than a decade. A lot of time people that have a PSP, like almost 2 decades at this point. So PSP users have probably gotten their stuff worth, and the PSP is like super heavily moddable. Every game ever that you could acquire on PSP is able to be emulated, basically. So that one's less stinging than the Vita and PS3 closing, because like Metal Gear Solid 4.
Oh,
that game's just gonna be gone, basically, because you can't play that on anything else than a PS3.
Unless you get a physical copy, of course. But
hey, physical copies of Metal Gear Solid 4 are already expensive. Like,
yep.
We're gonna see some PS3 and PS Vita games skyrocketing in price. That'll be fun to watch.
Or we'll also see them ported to other systems too.
That's my hope. What I'm hoping is that they're gonna end up porting a lot of these titles to PS4 and PS5. I would love to see Soul Sacrifice on the big screen because those games were phenomenal. Yeah, there's a lot of really cool stuff from those consoles. So I'm hoping that this is in preparation for a bigger push for backwards compatibility. My gut says it's probably not. Knowing Sony's track record with backwards compatibility, I kind of doubt it. But
they've been very iffy on it.
All those games will be lost in time.
I can
like
hope.
Tears in the Rain.
Tears in the Rain. Yep.
Time to die.
And the date for that closing is July 2nd. As of right now, it's possible that'll change. There's been a lot of like backlash against this, so it is distinctly possible that at least the PS3 and Vita stores might stick around for a little longer. Don't bet on it, but it's possible. And like Sony's stated reasons for these are just that they're wanting to focus more on the PS4 and PS5 experience. As it doesn't always track, because like it just means they gotta be paying for the server costs for these stores to be up. So I'm assuming it's probably just a cost versus people using them case. Yeah, that would be my assumption. It's very sad.
Yep.
We're gonna be
very sad
missing out.
Well, just the Vita in general is such a sad story.
I still think if the Vita had been like the Switch, it would have skyrocketed. Like if you had a way to plug your Vita into a TV, would have been incredible. Because they came out with the Vita TV thing a while ago. That is basically like a mini Vita you plug into a TV.
It had the ability to like stream your PS4 games to it, which was the PS4 was like hadn't even come out yet, and so it was such a new, interesting concept.
Well, by the time the Vita TV came out, I believe the PS4 had been out for a little while. The Vita TV didn't come out until like 2016, so it was a.
Oh no, not even the Vita TV. I mean, like streaming like your PS4
to console, your Vita,
to your handheld Vita. Yeah.
I did that a few times. It worked very well, surprisingly.
Yeah,
a lot of fun. I think I played a decent chunk of Persona 5 by streaming it to my Vita. So,
and looking back on the And looking back on the handheld too, it's like it's such a like beefy like tank of a system too. Like that thing is solid. Like if there's one thing I'll say about the Switch is that it's mostly due to it being kind of like a plastic construction. It can feel a little like creaky and delicate, especially when you have the Joy-Cons on the side that like have a slight wiggle to it. But if you look back at the Vita, it's like it's made out of, you know, glass and some metal parts and just like really solid freaking plastic, and it was just a tank of a machine.
Yeah. No, it just this is always the hard thing about like game preservation is we're starting to hit the point where like emulation becomes so difficult that it's really quite impossible to get caught up to the games that are going away.
And
we're
so many
also hitting
games
the
are
point where
moving
like we're losing a lot of really high quality stuff. So
yeah,
it's a shame.
and with this big like digital push, it's harder to preserve games where there aren't physical copies as well.
Yeah.
So
Wyatt, I'm gonna, while Brett's not here, because we can talk about Apple Arcade while Brett's not here. I can bring up that Apple Arcade has received a giant update that includes Fantasian, the original Final Fantasy creators' new game that's like based in models. It's made out of like actual models that they recorded. So that has launched by Hironobu Sakaguchi. His studio has launched Fantasian. So
yep.
The interesting thing, we learned that Mistwalker's Fantasian is a two-parter. It's not a one and done release. So there's already some questions there. Apparently it's really good from everything I've heard. Mm-hmm. So Wyatt, I want to bring up again the issue with Apple Arcade right now that I have is just the inaccessibility of these games. And the fact that they can't be played on anything but Apple devices.
Yes. So I am of two minds on this, and Brett and I constantly bicker about this. I am like one of the 5 people left on the planet that sees the potential and like sees mobile platform as like a legitimate platform for video games. And I think Apple is Apple, and Apple can do some very obnoxious Apple things. I will never ever deny that for a second. They are very annoying. However, I think they are making a legitimate, they're doing something that I've always wanted to see, which is making a legitimate push for quality mobile games. And I think that part of that, and look, the Apple Store, we've talked about that with Apple Store and Epic, like that's a separate discussion. I think what's really exciting to me is that the idea of Apple Arcade allows, it's this stamp of quality in the sense that you're getting a game that isn't like a Clash of Clans ripoff, you know, microtransaction garbage. It's a seal of quality in that the game that you're getting is a legitimate video game, and it was like more of a labor of love from the developers than like your typical microtransaction fueled disaster. And they've also made this big push in promoting companies to create like controllers for iPhone. Like there's the made for iPhone insignia, which implies that this works perfectly with your iPhone, you know, 0 latency or whatever. And many Apple Arcade games support that. And I'm just really excited that maybe like these pushes that Apple are making with the use of exclusive games as well will really kind of start to show people that it's a legitimate platform for like really great games, because I don't think that's there yet, because I don't think people are ready to take mobile games seriously. And that's why mobile games keep becoming garbage, is because no one actually wants to pay for it.
Well, okay. So I want to bring up one other thing with this, because we've talked about the mobile game stuff before. I think what it comes down to for Brett and I is that like, my vision's bad. I can't play mobile games for very long. Like I just can't read them because it's hard to see. And like your fingers are in the way. It's just, to me, I need that sense of tactileness to get a lot of satisfaction. Like I need the rumble. I need the buttons to press. And something like a controller will help with that for a mobile game, but then I still have the issue of I'm looking at a phone. And then we come to something like the Apple TV, which is a like $150 thing that you can plug in to your TV to play Apple Arcade games if you have Apple Arcade. Now, so you would think that would be the solution for someone like me, right? But then this is where the problem happens. That device is the price of a Nintendo Switch on its own at this point. And it plays a very limited selection of games, and those games will inevitably feel worse than playing on a contemporary console, because it's a much less powerful piece of tech. Like the Apple TV is not a console. It's not a PS4 or an Xbox One. It's not a PS5 certainly. So you're going to be getting an experience that is on your TV worse, despite the games sometimes being designed around that type of experience. So like Fantasian is a game that, from all the stuff we've seen of it, works well with a controller. It looks beautiful on a TV, and yet most people can't play it on that because they need to have an Apple device. And so I think this is where that problem of like, Apple, just if Apple Arcade was on anything else, just anything else that wasn't an Apple device, I would get it in a heartbeat. But you're trying to keep your little closed ecosystem here. That makes it completely inaccessible for someone like me.
And that's totally understandable.
Which I think is not an issue with Apple Arcade. Like, I want to make it clear that's not where the problem is. I think it's Apple's like hardware policies are extremely anti-consumer in a way that is just like very unhelpful. Because like there's a bunch of issues of like, I'm a developer. If I want to develop on something for Apple, I need to own an Apple device. But there's like 8 other processes I have to do if I want to like test something on an Apple device. Whereas if I have my Android phone, I can plug it into my computer, run my app on it, and test if it works through like one cord. So it's an issue of like, they really need to just take an examination of who uses their devices and like what is useful. Because I legitimately think they're going to start like ostracizing more developers like they have Epic at this point, and run into this issue of like, you might be funding a project like Fantasian that may not have gotten made elsewhere, but if a developer is presented with the choice between Apple Arcade and Game Pass for funding, I think that's where that's going to end up edging out to Game Pass, is that like Apple Arcade would just be an inherently worse thing to go with because fewer people are going to play your game. A lot of people that have Apple phones that use that Apple tech that are fine with the trade-offs because it doesn't affect them. Like your day-to-day Apple user, I think, isn't affected by the fact that they can't like test an app on their phone, right? It doesn't matter. Mm-hmm. They're never going to try to do that. But those also tend to be people that don't want to play a JRPG on their phone. Like they're going to want to play something more like Threes or a game that is more designed for that mobile experience that Wyatt was talking about, like Monument Valley, where you have games that like take advantage of being mobile.
Sorry. I think we could get to a point where people are okay with that, though. And that's my big thing. Well,
I think Apple is shooting themselves in the foot, preventing that. That's my stance, is that like they're making so many anti-consumer decisions with their hardware and everything that it is undercutting their software. Because their software is like super high quality, but they keep undercutting who has access to that. That I think it's becoming more of an issue, especially as Apple Arcade is expanding and like they're getting more high profile things.
I'm not happy that Apple is the one that's making these big moves to like make mobile gaming like a legitimate thing. Like just because, like you said, they're very closed off. But I guess I'm just glad that someone is doing it, because some of my favorite memories of playing games is on my phone. Like I'll never forget the first time I played Monument Valley. You know, I played the entirety of Telltale's The Walking Dead on my phone, because I felt like it was a game that I didn't need to purchase on a console or a PC in order to get the full experience from, because that's just how simple the game is. And it just makes me really sad that people don't see it that way.
Well, I mean, I think the legitimate solution is the Switch approach of just have something that does both. Because there are times that you're, of course, going to want to play something like in bed, relaxing, get to continue your game of like Persona. You're playing Persona and you get to continue it while you're in bed. That's what I did with my Vita. So it would be great if I could then use it on a bigger screen But with Apple, that's very hard to do.
I mean, it's sad that Apple is making it inconvenient, because ideally having like really high quality, like really nice games on your phone should be like peak,
the lowest barrier to entry of anything.
well,
right?
yeah, it should be like peak convenience, because you like who in this day and age doesn't have a phone in their pocket at like almost all times of the day, right? And so the idea of just pulling your phone out and then bam, you have like a fully fledged game, a fully fledged experience in your pocket should be great in theory, but because Apple is Apple, they make that what should be really convenient not. And so I am disappointed, and I'm sad that it's Apple that's making the push. But like I said, I'm just glad someone's doing it, and I hope that with Apple's restrictions, it will encourage other people to try and do something like this.
I will add, Apple's not the only one doing it. Square Enix has actually been making some really high quality mobile games.
But in terms of who are like either developing phone like operating systems or hardware, you know what I'm saying? Like you don't see the same amount of effort from Google, from Samsung, that sort of thing.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, Google has an Apple Arcade equivalent, and it's not very good.
No.
And it's far cheaper, but it is still like the kind of thing where you're better off just playing like one game you like than doing that. But yeah, I do legitimately think like it's a thing where Apple is trying to take the Epic Games approach that Epic had been doing a lot. They're doing less of now, where it's just getting a ton of exclusives. But the issue with Apple Arcade is that those exclusives are often things that aren't suited to mobile. So I agree with Wyatt wholeheartedly in things that are like Monument Valley, where it really takes advantage of the fact that it's a mobile game. It doesn't really work on other platforms because it's
also things unique. Like Her Story was originally a mobile game. I think it's come to other platforms now.
Yeah, Her Story works on other platforms. Like Monument Valley would be less fun on other.
You could technically play Monument Valley on a PC, but I feel like so much of the game's
you lose
enjoyment
so much of the like.
So yeah, definitely.
Whereas a game like Fantasian doesn't take advantage of being mobile. Like it's not doing anything that a regular game doesn't do. I think that's where the issue comes on. Is like there's a lot of Apple Arcade games that want you to play with a controller, and at that point I'm like, huh.
I want that to be like not scoffed at though. Like I want that to be a completely like, oh, this game wants me to use a controller on my phone. Okay, fine. Like I want that to be normalized, because I feel like people shouldn't. I hope we get to a point where that isn't immediately scoffed at.
Well, the issue isn't using a thing, but like if I have to now use a controller, why can't I put it on a bigger screen? Like, because then the phone is doing nothing for me, right? The phone is doing nothing aside from being a portable way to do it. But adding the controller now means I have to lug around a controller.
But I mean, if you're on the bus, right? Well, and also, I will say too, a lot of those controllers that you see, those like made for iPhone controllers, are things that are very portable in and of themselves.
I agree that it's great as an option, but I think what's happening is that Apple is making it the only option, right? So that means someone like me who has eye problems and doesn't want to look at a small screen for very long isn't going to play a game like Fantasian with a controller on my phone, because the entire time I'm going to be like, this is kind of hurting my eyes, and I could just go play Final Fantasy on my computer, right? Like I could play something on a screen that doesn't hurt my eyes to look at. Which I think is where the problem is of like those games specifically. They need something that is like the xCloud, where you can play it on any device that you have.
I mean, you can. It's just any Apple device, which is where the problem is.
Well, yeah, because like the Apple device thing of like that restricts so many people.
Yeah.
And it's the kind of thing where like if Apple had a consumer level device, I wouldn't have as much of an issue. But the cheapest Apple device you can get to play some of these games is like $200.
Yeah,
that's a price tag.
Yeah,
and it is a glorified like Roku that you're playing on.
No, and I see it as we're in the kind of situation right now where we're approaching what I want mobile gaming to be, but it's in that awkward phase of like we're making progress, but it's also like an awkward like it's I kind of equate it to when 3D games on like N64, PS1 were starting to become a thing, but 3D graphics even back then were awkward and people were trying to figure out how to make games in 3D. I feel like we're in that stage of like taking mobile games seriously, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
We're in this awkward phase of it may not make sense right now, but it's the building steps to something greater.
Yeah, that's where I falter in that I don't think Apple is going to finish taking those steps. That's my biggest concern.
No, but hopefully they will inspire someone to do that. Even if they like kind of pave the way to do that for someone else, I'm fine with that.
Well, because I think a great solution right now is that like Xbox Game Pass now includes xCloud, which you can use to play certain games on your phone that are like legacy games that have been reworked to work with touch controls. So you can now play like the entirety of Viva Pinata on your Android phone. Can't do it on Apple because Apple doesn't allow Xbox's streaming service on them because they don't want it to compete with Apple Arcade. And I'm just like, that is so dumb.
I just won't be happy until Infinity Blade exists again.
That was the other thing. I kept finding a moment to bring up Infinity Blade because whenever we talk about mobile games, we have to talk about Infinity Blade and how wonderful it is.
Well, because Apple locks their hardware down that you can't emulate anything, and that means like we were just talking about game preservation. Apple games are like the hardest thing to preserve.
Yep.
Which is,
but again,
horrific.
Infinity Blade, another example of a game that does not translate to other, to other platforms,
which I'd be fine with if I could still play it on an Apple phone, but I can't.
No, the biggest hurdle right now in terms of like this progression to something that I want is Apple. They're the ones that are getting in the way of it making so much progress at the moment.
Which is a shame. It feels like to me they just don't have people behind it that like care about video games as a whole. My bet is that they have like a person designing the Apple Arcade experience from a product perspective and not from like.
Or they have people who are passionate about it. They have people who are passionate about it, but they have to stay within their strict Apple guidelines.
Well, that's what I mean. Like they're not being led by someone who cares. Is my thing. Like I don't think the person at the top of whatever Apple Arcade is a person that has either the leave to make those kind of decisions or the want to make those decisions.
Yeah,
which is a real shame because I think it's a thing of like Apple doesn't want to treat games as like the type of media that they are, that it can be like art or that can be like just a casual experience. They
most likely see it as, oh crap, the industry makes a lot of money.
Yeah, they see it as a product first, which is the thing that like rubs me the wrong way. If it legitimately feels like Game Pass, people were concerned about that, but I think Xbox has proven again and again that Game Pass is legitimately like a consumer-facing product.
And again. And again. And again. And again.
This is good. But yeah, I think with that, we've done the podcast, which means all that's left is shoutouts. I hope everyone's ready.
Yep.
Alex, you said yep first, so it's your turn.
Okay.
Was that your shoutout?
My actual shout out is to the needed eraser that I've been fidgeting with this entire podcast.
Of course.
I'll go next. Shout out to the Deep Rock Galactic soundtrack. It's this incredibly awesome, like bass heavy sort of 80s synthwave type of stuff, and it just sounds incredible, and it just gets you pumped up for every single game. And the only thing that is bad about it is that it's not available on Spotify. That's the only problem I have with it.
It's rough.
It makes me sad. Yep.
That means I gotta say my shout out is to the song Showdown from the Project Wingman soundtrack, because Brett had reminded me of how good it is, and it's really good. One of those games that just has like an outstanding soundtrack. Great. That and the one dude who made a trailer for April Fool's Day of Ace Combat Cross Project Wingman as a DLC for Ace Combat 7 It was made so well that
Oh.
it fooled me. Yeah, I was fooled until the
Oh.
end, and it's like mod available on ModDB. I was like, oh, it's not real. It was
Have
great
you
while it
tried the
lasted.
mod?
Well, it's just a skin for a plane because Ace Combat does a lot of like plane skin DLCs. So
Oh, okay.
there's like voice lines and stuff. It was cool. It was fun. But that was it. And guess what else is it? Right now, that's it for the podcast. Tuesdays, 7 a.m. every week. Find us on YouTube and on any podcast platform of your choice. Most podcast platforms, including Apple. Apple, please don't kick us off for what we said this episode.
Apple, I still use your phones to this day. Please don't kick us off.
Apple, I'd use your phones if they had a headphone jack.
Apple, I use wireless earbuds.